Welcome to today's deep dive.
Yeah.
Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of absolute precision,
Oh, absolutely.
right? Think of it kind of like engineering. You
Yeah.
fall off your bike, your arm hurts, the doctor takes an x-ray, and there's that jagged white line right on the screen.
Very binary.
Exactly. The doctor points to it and says, there is the fracture. It is a completely binary situation. It's either broken or it's not broken.
And I mean, that provides a profound sense of comfort for people.
Yeah, it really does.
Because as a society, we're just deeply conditioned to prefer problems that are visible, problems that can be neatly categorized and then immediately treated with like a physical intervention. Put a cast on it and you're good.
But the moment you step into the world of neurodevelopment and behavior, that neat binary x-ray machine just breaks down completely.
Shattered.
It really does.
Yeah.
Suddenly you're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is incredibly murky. And for our mission today, we are dismantling, and I mean completely reframing, everything you thought you knew about one of the most frustrating, exhausting situations a family or an educator can face.
Which is, of course, the child who simply refuses to get out of the car and walk into the school building.
Exactly. And I really want to emphasize to you listening, this deep dive is going to completely change the way you view childhood behavior.
We really are wading into some deep diagnostic waters today. We're pulling from two incredibly revealing sources to do this.
Yes, our stack for today is fantastic.
First, we have excerpts from a clinical guide, and it's titled Beyond School Refusal, Clinical Support for Student Anxiety.
A great text.
It really is. And the second source takes that clinical theory and shows us the actual reality on the ground. We're looking at programmatic details from a K-12 mental health service down in Georgia called MentalSpace School.
So if you're a parent dealing with morning meltdowns or, a teacher looking at an empty desk, the default societal setting is just to view this as a behavioral issue.
Right. It's almost always framed as defiance.
Always. But we are going to look past those surface level symptoms, the crying in the driveway, the locked bedroom doors, to understand the why behind them. We're talking about a deeply biological, entirely treatable condition.
And to do that effectively, we have to start by really interrogating the very language we use to describe the problem.
Which is so important.
Because how we label a problem, well, it dictates how we try to solve it.
Okay, let's unpack this semantic shift. Because I know it sounds a bit like we're just policing language, right?
Sure.
But our sources emphasize that the outward behavior itself is incredibly real. I mean, the morning meltdown is a real thing.
Very real.
The issue lies entirely in that word, refusal. Calling the school refusal feels like calling a kid with a severe peanut allergy peanut butter defiant.
Oh, that's the perfect way to put it.
Right. It implies this stubbornness that completely ignores a severe underlying condition.
What's fascinating here is how the clinical guide makes a forceful argument right out of the gate about this. They say the phrase, school refusal needs to be permanently retired by schools and families.
Retired completely.
Because that word, refusal, it paints this picture of a student sitting there with their arms crossed, actively and rationally plotting to defy authority.
Like they're just being bad on purpose.
Exactly. But the clinical data shows that in over 90% of these cases, conscious defiance is completely absent.
Over 90%?
Yeah. It's actually driven by severe anxiety, OCD, sensory overload, social phobia, or even unprocessed trauma. The guide uses this brilliant phrase, actually.
Oh, yeah. What was it?
It says these diverse clinical conditions are all just wearing different clothes for the day.
Wearing different clothes for the day. I love that. But I want to dig into that a bit because from the perspective of a school principal standing at the front doors, the outward behavior looks identical.
It does. A kid is simply not walking through the doors.
Right. But internally, the mechanisms driving that action are wildly different.
They are. Consider, for example, what sensory overload actually does to the brain. For a neurotypical student, walking down a crowded school hallway is, just noisy.
Yeah, a bit loud, maybe annoying.
But for a student with sensory processing differences, the hum of the fluorescent lights, the chaotic echoing of lockers slamming, the unpredictable physical proximity of hundreds of other kids,
It's too much.
their brain cannot filter that input. The nervous system actually registers that flood of sensory data as a literal physical attack.
Wow.
Or take a student paralyzed by an obsessive-compulsive loop. They aren't choosing to stay in the car. Their brain is firing this relentless, terrifying, intrusive thought that they just cannot break free from.
So by slapping the label school refusal on all of them, a school is basically just treating a symptom, right?
Yeah,
while remaining completely blind to the actual disease.
that's exactly what's happening.
So if the student isn't making a conscious, defiant choice to stay home, what exactly is happening inside their body when they pull up to the drop-off line?
Well, the clinical guide explains that the student's nervous system has essentially tagged the school building itself as a threat.
The building itself.
Yes,
Right.
not necessarily a specific bully or a difficult math test, though. I mean, those can be catalysts.
Here?
The physical environment of the school has been mapped by the brain's amygdala as a site of profound danger.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because we aren't just talking about a mental block or like a feeling of nervousness here.
No, not at all.
This is a full-blown physiological takeover.
Mm.
The sources detail these severe physical symptoms. We're talking a pounding heart, a tight chest, a churning stomach, and literally frozen limbs.
You understand why this happens? Think of the amygdala like a car alarm.
Okay.
Its whole job is to protect the vehicle. But if the sensor is miscalibrated, a gentle breeze or a leaf falling on the windshield will trigger the exact same blaring, deafening alarm as someone actually smashing the window with a brick.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
The car alarm isn't faking it. It genuinely registers a threat. So when a child's amygdala acts as a faulty smoke detector, it doesn't consult the rational, logical prefrontal cortex,
It just bypasses it.
bypasses conscious thought entirely, and floods the bloodstream with adrenaline and cortisol. The body chooses for them.
And those physical symptoms are the direct result of that chemical flood. Like the churning stomach isn't just a metaphor for feeling uneasy.
Exactly. The autonomic nervous system is literally halting the digestive process.
Wait, literally halting it.
Yes. It violently redirects blood flow away from non-essential systems like the stomach and pushes it into the major muscle groups.
Oh, to prepare the body to fight or run away.
You got it. That sudden shift is what causes the nausea and the tightness.
And what about frozen limbs?
That's the dorsal vagal complex taking over. When the brain decides that fighting or fleeing won't work, it triggers the freeze response, which is a primal predator evasion tactic.
So the body is literally immobilizing itself to survive. Precisely. It's reacting faster than their conscious thoughts can even catch up.
So if the nervous system is responding to the school building the same way it would to a literal bear in the woods, how can we possibly expect a child to just tough it out or use sheer willpower to walk inside?
You can't. When survival instincts are engaged at that level, logic just completely fails.
You cannot lecture a pounding heart.
Yeah.
You can't give detention to a churning stomach.
Exactly. And that completely invalidates the traditional disciplinary approach. Sending a truancy officer, handing out a suspension, threatening a student with a failing grade.
It's pouring gasoline on a fire.
It really is. You're taking a nervous system that is already overwhelmed by a perceived threat, and you're adding a very real punitive threat right on top of it.
This raises an important question, though. How do schools and families fundamentally shift their systems to treat this as a clinical issue rather than an administrative one?
Well, the clinical guide demands a pivot. We have to discard the punitive model entirely. The most important sentence an educator or a therapist can say to a struggling family is just 3 words. This is treatable.
Oh, man. I imagine the relief of hearing that is just staggering for a parent.
Oh, it removes so much shame.
It tells the child they aren't broken, and it tells the parents they haven't failed.
And applying this clinical lens, it normalizes the physiological experience, which is the first step in actually dismantling that anxiety.
Okay, but let me push back here for a second, just to play devil's advocate.
Sure, go ahead.
I can imagine a frustrated school administrator or a parent saying, but if we don't discipline them, aren't we just letting them skip school? If a kid throws a fit and instead of a tardy slip they get a soothing therapy session, aren't we just building a reward system for avoidance?
That is the most common pushback from traditional educational systems. But it stems from a total misunderstanding of how behavioral conditioning works.
Oh.
You're describing operant conditioning. The idea that if you reward a behavior, it increases. But that only applies to voluntary conscious actions.
Oh, and this isn't voluntary.
Exactly. A true panic attack is an involuntary physiological state. You cannot positively reinforce a biological panic response any more than you can positively reinforce a seizure.
Wow. So soothing the nervous system doesn't teach the brain to panic more often. It actually teaches the brain that it's safe to power down the alarm.
Precisely. A clinical lens is not a free pass to skip school. The ultimate goal is always attendance.
Right.
But punishment doesn't fix a miscalibrated nervous system. The right support does. It's the medical intervention required so the child can actually tolerate the school environment again.
So what does this all mean in practice? Because theoretically, it makes perfect sense. But let's look at the logistical reality of a public school. A
Mm.
principal is managing 1,000 students, bus schedules, state testing, budgets.
It's a lot.
How can a school suddenly pivot to functioning as a clinical mental health facility?
The logistical hurdles are massive. Schools are educational institutions, they aren't medical clinics.
Which brings us to our second source, looking at the concrete solution.
Yes, the programmatic details from MentalSpace School in Georgia.
They provide an incredibly detailed blueprint of how a school system actually bridges this massive gap.
They really do. They provide K through 12 mental health support specifically for Georgia schools. And looking at their services, you can see how they solve that logistical nightmare.
What kind of services are we talking
They
about?
offer same-day teletherapy, dedicated therapist teams for specific schools, crisis intervention, suicide, and violence prevention.
Wow, that's comprehensive.
It is. Plus staff wellness programs and family counseling.
See, that stands out to me. This isn't just dropping a single guidance counselor into a building of 1,000 kids. With family counseling, staff wellness, and same-day teletherapy, they are treating the entire ecosystem around the student.
Because the student's nervous system is reacting to that ecosystem. If the teachers are burnt out, or if the parents are consumed by the stress of those morning battles, the child's anxiety will only amplify.
You have to lower the temperature of the entire environment.
Exactly. And importantly, their therapists are licensed, diverse, and culturally competent.
I noticed that in the materials. Why is that specific detail about cultural competence highlighted so prominently?
Well, because establishing psychological safety is just impossible without trust. If a student from a marginalized background is experiencing trauma-induced anxiety, forcing them to speak with a clinician who lacks the cultural context to understand their lived experience.
That could just trigger more anxiety.
Exactly. MentalSpace ensures the clinical support actually mirrors the demographics of the student body.
Then there is the massive administrative burden they take off the schools. I mean, the documentation notes they are HIPAA and FERPA compliant.
Which is a huge deal.
Yeah, trying to navigate patient medical privacy and student educational records is a legal minefield for a school principal.
It really paralyzes a lot of districts from even attempting clinical interventions.
And the sources highlight they provide support for Georgia schools to meet the HB 268 compliance deadline coming up in July 2026.
Right.
For those outside of Georgia listening, HB 268 is this looming state mandate requiring schools to implement formalized mental health and safety protocols. It's a massive regulatory mountain.
And MentalSpace basically steps in and says, we will handle the medical compliance, you focus on the education.
But the most innovative part of their blueprint has to be the financial accessibility, because the best clinical intervention in the world is useless if a family in crisis can't afford it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, removing that financial barrier is what transforms this from a nice theory into a functioning reality.
The insurance aspect is staggering. They accept major insurances, BCBS, Cigna, Aetna, UHC, Humana, Peach State, CareSource, and AmeriGroup.
It's a very wide net.
But the detail that completely redefines the landscape is that Medicaid patients pay $0.
$0. Think about the compounding stress on a family dealing with school-based anxiety. A parent might be missing hours of work just trying to coax their kid out from under the bed.
Right.
The last thing that family can absorb is a massive out-of-pocket therapy bill.
So when you remove the financial friction, handle the legal compliance, provide culturally competent therapists, and treat the whole ecosystem, the outcomes just speak for themselves.
They really do. The data reports an 89% improved attendance rate.
89%.
That statistic alone completely dismantles the devil's advocate argument from earlier. Treating this clinically does not encourage kids to skip school. It gets 89% of them back into the classroom.
Along with a 92% reduction in anxiety and an 85% family satisfaction rate, they are fundamentally healing the root cause.
It functions as such a powerful proof of concept. The clinical guide asserts we must change the paradigm, and MentalSpace School proves that when a system commits to that paradigm, the attendance numbers naturally follow.
And for anyone in the Georgia area listening who wants to see how this model works, or maybe get in touch, the sources list their contact info. You can visit mentalspaceschool.com or email them directly at mentalspaceschool@tgctherapy.com.
It's really a remarkable program.
We have covered incredible ground today, from the murky diagnostics of behavior all the way to concrete, systemic solutions.
It's been quite a journey.
To synthesize all of this for you listening, whether you're an educator staring down chronic absenteeism, a parent dealing with morning battles, or just someone who remembers your own childhood anxieties, this information changes the paradigm.
We're moving from judging a child's defiance to actively supporting their nervous system.
We're acknowledging that in these moments of panic, a child's body is making choices for them faster than their thoughts can catch up.
Which leaves us with a really fascinating thread to pull on as we close out.
Yes. We want to leave you with a final thought to ponder as you go about your week. Our sources note how fast the autonomic nervous system is. So, if a child's nervous system is moving faster than their conscious mind in the school parking lot,
Right.
if their body is hijacking their brain and forcing them into a freeze response that just mimics defiance, how might this clinical lens change the way we interpret other frustrating behaviors?
In children, in our peers, or even in ourselves.
Exactly. How many things do we write off as simple bad choices when, in reality, we might be looking at an overwhelmed nervous system desperately trying to feel safe? Because once you learn how to look past the surface-level symptom to find the underlying biology, you really can never look at defiance the exact same way again.